I'll abbreviate this some when I get over to page 60. I didn't put the pages. It's 66, 67. Solve quadratic equations using square, I may abbreviate, go ahead and abbreviate that, using square roots. So let's say roots. Okay, 66. So if you do watch a video, it may be a little longer. You got more gaps in it, but boy, it will make my life a lot easier not have to go edit those. You know, when you record it and then you have to listen to yourself doing it, it's such a pain. And today is the January the 5th, 21, lesson 28, and I'm just going to put solve quadratic, I'm going to abbreviate that, equations, abbreviate that, with square roots. Okay, let's go back to 27. You don't necessarily have to go back, but if you want to just look at what I have, a quadratic equation specifically has a squared in it, and it always has two answers. So the squared in it is simply the degree, like right here. I know that's quadratic because it has a squared in it. When it has a cube in it later, it's going to have three answers. If it has a fourth, it's going to have four answers. So we're looking at the concept of that zero product property, that if you can factor it, now that was factoring. If you could factor it, then you could find your two nice, pretty answers. All of the ones in lesson 27 were nice, rational answers. And what does that mean, rational? No square roots, no square root of threes, no complex numbers, which we're fixing to talk about on Thursday. We're going to step back from quadratic equations for just a day, introduce a new set of numbers, and then come back, and that just opens a bigger door. We will be getting into factoring on the calculator pretty quick. So that will be something that will help you with your factoring and all the arithmetic that we do. So remember, a quadratic looks like, it's just called quadratic form, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. A cannot be 0. I forgot to tell my second block. They did this lesson, my honors class did this lesson today. They're one behind you on those. And what else do I need to tell you? A can't be 0 because if A becomes 0, you lose your squared, therefore it's no longer quadratic. The quadratic comes from the idea of a four-sided square because you've got squared. I know we think of quad as being 4. We think of, you know, when you see the word quad, but it's actually quart. It's quartic when it's fourth degree. When we have x to the fourth, it would be quartic, like 4 quarts in a gallon. Okay, we're just going to start out super simple. How do we do them with square roots? They're going to look different than this. But my question is it quadratic? So let's look at x squared equals 4. Is it quadratic? Now, how do you know it's quadratic? Does it have a squared? Yes. Then it absolutely has two answers. Let's say two solutions. That sounds a little more advanced. Now, to get your solution, you have to have the x squared by itself. The x squared by itself, if you can. Now, there's going to be a couple of them that we kind of got to go in a different door. But when it's written like this, we need the x squared by itself. At that point, we can do square root, square root. If you take square root of one side, you can do the square root of the other. And I think we've talked about that. It's just like if I want to add 10 to one side. You know, if I have x plus 10 equals 17, if I'm going to subtract 10 from this side, I have to do the same on both sides. I can add 2. I can take square root of both sides as long as you do the same to both sides. And I can do that. So the square root of x squared is x. That goes back to, oh, that's a few lessons back. That was second quarter. That was before Christmas. Now let's talk about the square root of 4. Now our instinct is to just say 2. But now why is 2 the square root of 4? Because 2 times 2 is 4. But can the square root also be negative 2? Is 2 times 2, because 2 times 2 equals 4. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. Also, let's do it like that. That'll make it a little bit easier. So when you're taking the square root, now you can write it like that. Sometimes you will see it. I don't think they do it that way on the ACT, but sometimes you see it where they might write x equals, and they'll put the plus, they'll put the minus, and they'll say a 2. Those mean the same thing. Positive or negative 2 in one complete little sentence there. Those mean the same thing. So you can write it either way, as long as you have your 2 solutions. Number 2, x squared equals 18. It is quadratic. It has 2 answers. Now notice on these, there's not an x term. There's no like a 5x or anything like that in it. This is, if you move the 18 over, you would have x squared minus 18 equals 0. That would get it in this form, and it doesn't have an x term. So I'm going to do square root, square root. So we get x equals, now let's talk about, and I'm going to go ahead, well, we'll do that in just a second. Now let's do the square root of 18. Is it a perfect square like 4 was? It's not. Can we break it down? Now we can punch it in our calculator, but remember that's going to give me 4 point something, but it's not exact. We want to do the factor tree. So 18 is, let's just do it this way. I'm going to do the square root of, it's usually I start, well, I'm going to do 3 squared times 2. I think y'all are okay with me doing that. It's 3 times 3 times 2. And when you separate it out, x equals, you can take the square root of that 9, which is 3, square root of 2. Now, that's only one answer. You've got to put the plus or minus in front of it to make 2 answers. And actually, I'm going to go back up here and put it right there. I'm going to actually put it in both places. But I'm looking at your final answer, 2 answers. Now, are they always going to set up like this? Not necessarily, because we're going to talk about the ones that are missing something else. I think the ones we're going to do, actually they have all the parts, they're just written a little bit different. Now, something else I need to say here is get squared term by itself first, in parentheses, if possible. And we're going to do the ones that are not possible on page 67. So if I have, let's do x squared minus 9 equals 21. It is quadratic. It is squared. You have 2 answers, always. That's what you need to tell yourself. This is quadratic because it has a squared and it has 2 answers. And you'll see when you have cubed, it'll have 3 answers, you know, as we work them. Now, get your squared term by itself. So we need to add the 9. And we get x squared equals 30. Square root. And we get x equals, now will 30 break down? The square root of 30, the factor tree of 30 is 2 times 3 times 5. Now notice there's nothing repeating in it, so it's actually just plus or minus square root of 30. That's your 2 answers. Now what are we going to do when we have one like this? What if we have, well, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I don't know that you have one exactly like this, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in here. 100k squared minus 6 equals 3. I was going to actually skip that step and go to the next one. and they may be written that way. I always ask myself, is this quadratic? Yes. Does it have two answers? Yes. So I need to get this thing by itself if I can. You can get it by itself if you have a variable with a squared on it. You're going to see the difference here in just a minute. So that means I got to get rid of that 6 first. So I've got 100k squared equals 9. Now, a lot of people are tempted to take the square root here, partly because that's a perfect square. You can take the square root of 100. You could, but what if it was a 17? It's not going to work there, especially in an upper math class, a college algebra, or something like that. So you need to get it by itself. I want k squared equals 9 over 100. I want it all the way down. Get your square term by itself, if possible, on this page, and you'll see when you can't get it by itself on page 67. Now, once your squared is by itself, do square root, and we got k equals. Now, it's a 9 over 100 under the square root, but you can actually, and I'm going to go ahead and put plus or minus, and I'm going to put square root of 9 over square root of 100. You can actually separate that. What is the square root of 9? And what is the square root of 100? 10. There's your two answers. Positive. Now, probably the ACT is going to write it positive 3/10, negative 3/10. That's the way you usually see the answers listed in an answer key. If you're checking answers, but you can shortcut it like that. Now, these can be shortcutted like that. It's like their answers are opposite. So, variable you can get the x squared, took square root, x squared, square root, k squared, square